Fin the Week is brought to you by Indulge, a digital agency built on thinking for the global financial services industry.
Hey there, and welcome to another episode of Fin the Week. I'm Amelia.
I'm Paul.
I'm Pat. I'm Russell.
How's everybody doing? Good week. Paul, you just come back off holiday. Are you feeling refreshed?
Yeah, very, very refreshed. And I was just saying to everyone that as I was leaving Madeira where we were, the weather started to turn a bit bad and we arrived back here and it was glorious. So I think we've brought the weather. So yeah, very refreshed and happy to have been away for a week.
We all appreciate you bringing the sun back with you.
Yeah, I thought it was the best thing to bring.
So this week, we're diving into a major piece of research. It's the 2025 Consumer Digital Index from Lloyds Banking Group. It's their 10th annual report, and this year it's their generative AI edition. And the headline stat it's a big one. But before we get into it, let's chat about everyone here in the group. Have any of you used AI for financial advice this week? And be honest about this.
I haven't, no, but it's one of those things I've kind of, it's always on my mind that if I've got a thing I need to figure out about anything, finance or anything, I would probably turn to AI as a first port of call, not necessarily to get me the final answer, but to get me in the ballpark. A bit like you would do. I've certainly done it with ailments, and if someone's feeling sick, checking up on that. So yeah, and I don't use it to sort of replace a doctor, but I use it to maybe point me in the right direction, or possibly panic me.
I mean, I've used it for looking at calculating loan repayments. My wife's about to move her salon to a new premises, and as part of that, there's a business loan involved, and we've been looking at different interest rates and just going into Claude and just saying, X thousand over 5 years with a 7% interest rate compared to a 9% interest rate. What's the monthly repayment? And it'll just calculate it all for you using, amortize the loan repayments out over the fixed term. And it's been really useful for that. I'm constantly in there asking questions about this and that and helping with my personal finances a lot. Yeah, every week.
I haven't recently opened a savings account, but my wife sorted all of that out, and she compared some different providers. I don't know if she used AI. We actually, I'm not sure. So that from a financial perspective, that's as close as the situation that I would have been in to use it. I probably would have done if I was comparing, like products myself. But yeah, a bit like Paul, I kind of use it to compare like everything. So for example, if I'm looking for like a new pair of running trainers, which is normally quite a lot, because it's very good at comparing things, because it pulls on it pulls on resource, it pulls on the information it finds. So it's very good at preparing, comparing products. Even as far as like, I've used it for like things that seem a bit odd, but are actually quite difficult to find online. So like the model number of like a gardening tool comparing against another model number of a slightly different model number of a gardening tool, to find out that, one of them has like a pull and hold lever and the other one has like a thumb switch or something. And it's so good at like breaking down like and comparing like products in a table.
It is very good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely something, obviously, that people are using. Let's get into this. So Lloyds Banking Group, they published their 2025 Consumer Digital Index. This year includes one of the largest studies to date on AI in personal finance. And the headline is 28 million UK adults, that's 56% of the adult population, have used AI for personal finance in the past year. And almost 1 in 3 are using it weekly. And here's where it gets interesting, because while people are clearly using AI for money management, there were real questions about trust, accuracy, and what this means for financial brands. Paul, before we get into the details, what was your kind of first reaction when you saw those numbers?
I think my initial reaction is one of, I was surprised at how high the percentage is. I wouldn't have even thought this might sound crazy, but I wouldn't have even thought that percentage of adults regularly use AI. When you factor in, if I imagine family members and things who, if I was to split my my wider family in half, I could probably imagine half of them have used it, half of them haven't. And so it surprises me that amount of people are using it regularly. But then it occurred to me that I was at an event quite a while ago now, and it was discussing independent financial advisors and wealth managers and that whole industry. And it was talking about a lot of people don't use IFAs when they probably should do. So, for instance, when they're planning retirement or planning some big life change, and the group was discussing like why might that be, and one of the core reasons seemed to be that people just don't think that a financial advisor is for them, because the assumption is that you only need a financial advisor if you have money. And the problem most people probably have is that they feel like they don't have money, and therefore going to an advisor. It's a bit like me going to a hairdresser and asking what I should do with my hair, and they'd look at my balding head and just sort of laugh me out the door. And you feel like that might be the same with a financial advisor. So I think, so then when I think about it in that context, when you suddenly have this AI tool sitting there ready to use, that you can just ask it all of the what you might think are silly questions about your own personal situation, and it's not going to judge you, and it will give you answers that get you, like I was sort of saying before, in the right ballpark towards an answer. Kind of makes a lot of sense then. And actually, does it open a lot of people up to the concept of, I don't say financial advice, but something that's close to that, so that then they can say, okay, now I know what I need to go and ask a financial advisor. So yeah, it's kind of that whole thought process has then made me conclude maybe I'm not surprised by that number. Maybe people don't feel threatened by it and therefore are using it because it's plugging a gap that was there.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of like having a conversation with someone who's really intelligent. So why would you not have a conversation with someone who's intelligent about like important matters? You know, whether it's finance or whether it's health, you know, it's much better at crunching numbers than me. You know, it's off the chart compared to what I could do in my head, which is kind of that kind of real time conversation that you're having with someone. You know, imagine having a conversation with someone who could calculate, you know, numbers to the extent like ChatGPT could in like a few seconds. It would just almost be impossible. I don't know if anyone on the world, like if anyone on the planet could do it. And I think that's why it's good for things like, it's good for like objective, making objective decisions. So if you gave it some information to use, let's say you gave it your, you know, monthly budget breakdown, for example, I'd expect it would come up with some quite interesting decisions. Even if you didn't have a lot left over, you know, it might help you push the margin on your budgets, for example, to the point where, you know, you might be able to afford to pay for your flights for your next holiday next year. It would definitely be worth exploring that. Where it has issues, and I've seen someone post about this on LinkedIn. So they were using AI to look at their dividend tax rates, and how much they would be paying in tax for on their dividends. HMRC introduced a different tax percentage on the day that they were speaking to it, to what it was giving back to them. So they were getting advice how much tax they were paying, which could be quite substantial. I think the percentage difference was a couple of percent. ChatGPT was kind of like 2% off what they would be paying from that day, because it hadn't pulled in the latest HMRC tax information to the point where they had to direct them to the exact page and the exact wording and the exact sentence of that update to then get ChatGPT giving them the exact advice. But let's say you were acting on that decision on the day and you didn't know yourself that it changed, and you didn't know where to point the AI, and you made a financial decision off the back of that because you thought you were going to be paying less tax. I think that's where there's a real danger having this conversation with the AI, like it would be for finance or like it would be for kind of health.
There's some interesting stuff in the Lloyds report on the idea of trust. I'm just looking at now. It says 40% of people trust banks and financial advisors more, whereas only 15% of people trust AI more. But that's still 15% of people trusting AI more than a sort of professional institution. That's quite shocking. And then it says as well, among 25 to 34-year-olds, nearly a quarter now trust AI generated financial advice more than traditional sources. That's crazy to me. That and kind of a recipe for disaster potentially.
Is that because it's so hard to access a traditional source these days? Because you've got banks, you've got high street banks shutting down all over the place. Sites are kind of almost universally quite difficult to use, especially if you're younger and you're not used to reading technical financial articles and documentation. You got your AI, ChatGPT right there. It's super accessible. It speaks to you in your own in language that you're comfortable with, and it gives you largely sound advice. Like there'll obviously be instances where it gets specific details wrong, like your example, Russell, where they happen to be discussing a tax rate that was changing on that very date. So they might get specific numbers wrong, but largely, if you ask ChatGPT about budgeting recommendations, it will give you a really sound, rounded answer on how to improve your budget. And that's a resource that, if you imagine you're like a 23-year-old straight out of university, you've got loans, you've got rent, like 10 years ago, you'd sort of be on your own. You might ask your parents about some advice and they'd give you some advice. It might be right, it might be wrong, might be 30 years out of date. But you probably wouldn't go further than that, right? But now you've got ChatGPT and it would say, okay, well, you could probably start thinking about your pension. And then that person would be like, why would I want a pension? I'm only 23. And it would explain that. And suddenly you've got loads of young people thinking about pensions when they didn't previously. So overall, I think it's really useful. And personally, one experience I've had with it, using Claude Code actually, which is an agentic tool, we had this issue where in my wife and I's shared bank account, every month we were going like £250 overdrawn, constantly having to top it up. It was quite clear we weren't paying enough in each month, but it was also quite clear we were like spending money in all sorts of random places. So I downloaded the last 12 months of bank statements from our online banking, dumped it in a folder and just unleashed Claude Code on them and just said, right, help me. We're going over budget every month. What's going on? And it went through every single transaction, reconciled each transaction into a category and produced an in-depth financial report for me and budget plan. And it said, right, this week, each week you're spending this much on groceries, which was way more than we thought, because I was just thinking we go to Waitrose every week and spend that. But actually, my wife goes to M&S on Thursday and there's all sorts of other bits we buy. It's just spending this month this much on subscriptions, this month on this much on power and electricity, and all of our bills have gone up and we hadn't really been considering that either. And it also asked me along the way kind of, how much do you want to save? How much do you want to save each month? How often do you want to go on holiday? And I had this back and forth, and it came back to me and said, well, if you want to go on holiday to this higher end place, then you need to start putting this much into your bank. But if you're happy with just jumping on the ferry and going to France once a year, you can get away with putting this in. So it really helps to sort of relate the amount of money we're putting away each month to real life outcomes. And the upshot of that was we sort of reluctantly stuck another couple of £100 a month in each into our shared account, cancelled a load of subscriptions, like reorganised some of our grocery shops. And we're in a way better position as a result. And I probably could have gone through that process myself, but it would have taken hours and hours that I never would have done, because it's just, your personal life and you just got other stuff to do. It's more, that feels like a high priority.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing because it can also, you could kind of, if you can document how you live, and I mean, I think we were talking about one of the previous podcasts about how the input is the most important thing to create a good output. If you can document your life daily, and whether that's spending habits or, or travel, if you have that data there, you can essentially use the AI to come up with suggestions to hit targets that you kind of set it, or to come up with its own suggestions. And you just kind of gave me that idea. If you gave it like your budget sheet, you could perhaps even ask it how you could become more sustainable as well, and it might actually come up with some good ideas around how you could become I don't know, let's say it'd be like, well, you could save some money by not driving to work, and cycle to work, because that would be better for the environment, and you'd save £600 a year, let's say. I'm sure it would be very good at that, and it'd be interesting if it went through. You could put in your shopping lists, especially people who order online. Imagine how powerful that would be. I mean, most of our monthly expenditure goes on shopping, to be honest. Could you take your could you hook in your Waitrose account through an API and tell it to analyze everything that you're buying, and whether you need to buy it, and what the price points would be if you could travel down the road and do this, and could it find those little micro adjustments that would have a macro improvement on your budgets if you have all this data that it gives you? That could be quite an incredible exercise, actually, and I'm sure that will become easier. It's just, where does it pull all this information from? I mean, my finances are just managed in a couple of spreadsheets, really. It certainly crunched that really well. I know it would, but could it go to that micro level where it's analysing the cost of bread, probably, to save you money?
Honestly, if everyone, like anyone, could go to AI and go back and forth with AI to help flesh out your 5 or 10 year goals, those could be financial or career based or health based or whatever, and the AI tool would genuinely put in place a long-term plan for you to help you achieve those goals, with things that you can do right now, things that you can do in the next week, and like milestones along the way. And that kind of goal setting and planning was just never accessible to a large proportion of the population until AI came along. So in that respect, it's a really incredible tool, and it's not really surprising people are using it for financial advice, because most people's goals feature finances quite heavily, don't they? Most people say, I'll have a goal of reaching 50 grand a year, or 100 grand a year salary, or I want to own a house, I want to own an Audi. People have these like fairly materialistic goals that are kind of top of their list. And genuinely, these tools will help you make decisions and guide the way you live your life in order to achieve those goals.
Just playing devil's advocate, because the scenarios you're describing there are quite pragmatic, and you're sort of looking at a smart way to budget and coming up with it. So your intentions are good. Like you've got an idea in mind, and you're just trying to organize yourself. What about someone in a different scenario who's perhaps up against it financially, or someone who is looking for the next get rich quick scheme? Do you think AI sort of, because the power of an independent financial advisor is that they're trained, they're regulated, they have to explore the market, they have to present stuff clearly, they can't lead you down the garden path, or there'll be consequences. Whereas people just relying on an independent, independent in a different sense, AI tool like ChatGPT that doesn't really answer to anyone currently, is there a risk that even a tiny bit of misinformation about a crypto scheme, for instance, or moving your pension to this thing, could cause havoc? And how should that be handled? I don't know if there is an answer, but I think those scenarios are probably playing out.
They can be quite sycophantic, can't they? So you could have a really crap business idea, and you could go to ChatGPT and say, "Oh, I've got 10 grand, and I could either use it on my family, or I could invest it into this great business idea I've got." And ChatGPT will be like, "Hey, that's an amazing business idea. Let me build you a website for that." And then you just blow your 10 grand on this crap business idea, and it's just a complete waste of time. And then if you do ask it for financial advice, it will always it will always add a disclaimer. You should get professional advice before investing and all that stuff. But it depends on the model you're using. Like Grok, for example, is probably more likely to recommend you invest in crypto than ChatGPT because it's kind of less bounded. But the risk is definitely there. If an IFA recommends you invest in a dodgy scheme, they're going to get in a lot of trouble. So they naturally approach advice with a lot of caution and backed by a lot of expertise and training. But these AI models don't. There's no one really responsible for it. So yeah, that's definitely a risk for sure. But in my experience, I haven't really, the models are trained to not do nefarious things like that. But there's always a risk that they will. Especially if you demonstrate that you're keen and you go into that conversation with the context that it's a good idea, the model is more likely to agree with you.
That's interesting. Leads on to, in the Lloyds report, it outlines some of the things that people are most worried about when using AI in this way. 43% very concerned about data privacy and security. 60% worry about the security of their personal or financial data. 45% concerned about being misled or scammed, and 26% worried about AI bias affecting recommendations. So, I mean, there are very valid concerns there, right?
Mm. In terms of, Pat, from your knowledge of how these models process data that you put into them, if you funnel, let's say you use a basic version of ChatGPT and you funnel in your, like, say, a PDF export of your bank statement, is it going to swallow that up and forever be a part of ChatGPT's future models, including your address and your account numbers and all of that stuff?
That's what they'd like. Yeah, that's what they'd like. And actually, when OpenAI released ChatGPT, it's kicked off this kind of AI revolution. By default, that's exactly what they did. So every conversation you had with ChatGPT at launch would be saved by OpenAI and then used to train future models. And that actually got AI off to a bit of a haphazard start, because straight away companies, blacklisted AI as insecure from a data protection perspective, because immediately they just assumed that by default that's how AI models work, that it would remember everything you discuss with it. But actually, they don't work like that at all. That was a feature that OpenAI deliberately introduced. And these days, by default, as long as you're on a paid version, they won't store your data and use it to train future models. If you're on the free version, it will ask you for permission. And I think some of them will force you to do that. Anything that's free isn't free, so you're paying with your data. A lot of the platforms now will kind of try and jostle you into that position where they are keeping your data and using it to train future models. And you have to also remember that all of these companies are based in the US. Anthropic, OpenAI, Microsoft, X, they're all US based, all their servers in the US. So every bit of information you put into these chat tools is going across the Atlantic and outside the scope of the GDPR. If it's your personal data and you're using it yourself, it's up to you. It's not a massive issue. But if you're doing it in a business context and you're passing client data into these tools and you're not doing it in a GDPR compliant way, then that's the problem. So you have to make sure that you're paying for the tool and that you've got the right guardrails in place and you've got a data protection agreement. So there's lots of things to consider from that perspective. So yeah, data privacy and security is valid. And OpenAI are starting to surface ads now on the free versions of ChatGPT.
That sounds like quite a practical challenge, because I would imagine with you as having a background in technology, when you got to the scenario of uploading the bank statement information to help you plan your budget, you probably provided that in a kind of quite easy to process format, like a CSV that didn't have anything personally identifiable. It was just transactions in a spreadsheet. But to a novice user, if they're chatting to their AI and they're saying, I need help planning my budget, and it says, oh, we'll fire across your bank statements and we'll have a look, I'd imagine most people would probably just download their bank statement and chuck it in, and that will include everything. That's potentially a big issue, isn't it?
Definitely. And honestly, within the next 5 years, what you'll start to see happen is you'll upload your bank statement, right? And it will show you, and if you're in your overdraft, right, and you upload your bank statement, then immediately you'll start having loan ads following you around the internet. That's exactly what's going to happen, because OpenAI have already started surfacing ads in ChatGPT. And at the moment, they're not based on your personal data, and they're very subtle and minimal. But the irresistible sort of journey of these big tech platforms is to gradually grow that advertising revenue. And at some point, OpenAI are going to start taking your highly private conversations, using that to build profiles of you, and then selling that data to advertisers so they can target things at you. I know your bank statement literally tells you everything that's going on in your life. So it could see that you shop at Waitrose. It could see you've been to the doctor 3 times in the last month, and suddenly you've got these like creepy ads following you around the internet. And that's where data privacy and security becomes like a real challenge. So I think my advice to anyone is, before you upload any personal data in, like, you get yourself on a paid plan. $20 a month, you'll get better models that are more accurate. You'll have an ad-free experience if you're using ChatGPT. You'll have the option for it not to save your data and use it in future conversations, and just kind of be aware of that, really. So if you're aware of it and you know how to go into your settings and configure it, it's not a problem.
Feels like a challenge, because quite often the people who will benefit the most from these types of, so the people who have the least access to an IFA are the people who have the least amount of disposable income, I suppose, and they're probably the least likely to have a paid subscription to any of these services as well, and it'll probably are more compelled to just use the free ones and see what happens. Yeah, I imagine the regulators are probably having to have a close look at this sort of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. But from an advertiser's perspective, the information that people give to their AI tool would be an absolute goldmine. The potential for monetization is absolutely enormous. And honestly, I think with the cost of running these models, advertising is probably the only way that these big tech firms are going to actually start to turn a profit. So we'll start to see it emerge. Right now, we're in a stage of the technology where all these big players are fighting for market share. So the tools are kind of largely free and very easy to use, and not tarnished by layers upon layers of banner ads and targeted ads. But the process of shittification is starting for sure. Have we talked about shittification before? Yeah, I think we have. Yeah, it started. OpenAI have started surfacing ads, and they're going to become more common, I think, across other providers as well.
It feels like a lot of these platforms start out free because essentially it's the humans who are testing these platforms and using them, so they can evolve them in the right way to the point of monetization, like serious monetization. We're essentially the guinea pigs, kind of testing all of like these apps. And I was just thinking about it from like a UX perspective as well. I think they're heavily used for advice at the moment, just heavily used in general, because the conversation to begin with, it feels private. There isn't any ads. It isn't pulling from your data. You feel like you're having a private conversation with this intelligent being. I mean, it's artificial. That kind of psychophancy as well. That kind of intrinsic desire to please, is something people like. You don't want to give it your financial information and for it to kind of, pass out or to or to judge you. You're getting that non-judgmental or fairly non-judgmental, leaning more towards the side of helping you, than not, which people like. There's that kind of, it's human nature to kind of speak to someone and feel like you're being understood, and to feel like they're kind of, giving you advice to improve. People want to that. And from like a user experience side of things, that works really well with the AI. Whether all that advice is sound or not is another is something that we've been discussing. When they start introducing ads, you're going to know that what you're telling it is feeding this, and the ads that are popping up, your bank statements are producing loan ads. I think people will automatically start, trusting it less. You make a good point, Paul. If you're asking the AI for advice on how to budget, and it's trying to tell you to sign up to $100 a month subscription when you're losing $100 a month, how can it provide that advice? So I think it works really well from your perspective at the moment because it feels private. It feels non-judgmental, and I think people who are in a bad financial situation will probably feel more comfortable. Not everybody, but I think some people, and perhaps, I don't know, perhaps that kind of student kind of use case as well may feel a lot more comfortable speaking to ChatGPT quickly, which is free and it's accessible and it's going to give them advice, and they would be, kind of divulging their financial situation to a human, like in a kind of one-to-one, office or like a video call kind of scenario where, if they do need some serious help, they might not feel comfortable asking for it.
For sure, it can feel, I'm sure, very intimidating for that person. So what does all this mean for financial services brands? Who controls the message, and are brands optimizing their content for AI consumption the same way they optimize for Google, for example?
Yeah, I think there's lots going on because I suppose there's a battle between brands to sort of be the ones who are referenced by these AI models. So if you're talking to it about a mortgage or a pension or whatever financial product, you want to be one of the brands that it name checks as it's going through that. So I think a lot of companies are focusing on that, and the way they're doing that is fundamentally what they've always done with search engine optimization. It's just a different flavor of that, maybe with a few details. But then I think there's also I think we've discussed before, it kind of ups the ante slightly because I think AI takes care of I think I might have mentioned it in a previous episode, the top of the funnel where you normally do your research and you're learning about a particular area. Normally you'd search on Google, then visit a few websites, do your research there, and then you'd move on. Whereas now you would use ChatGPT or one of the other models and do all of your research in that single space. And so I was thinking that this sort of research paper, if it would worry me most if I was an IFA, maybe, because I'd be thinking, are people just going to go and use ChatGPT instead of speaking to me? But then I kind of argued myself out of that because I thought, well, actually, it probably opens more people up to the concept of financial advice so that in the long run, they're more likely to be clued up and go and speak to a proper advisor once they've got the lay of the land. I'd be worried if I was like a compare the market type company that compares products, because arguably these AI agents could potentially do a much better job because they could understand you to a much deeper level. You could probably tell them all of your information once, and I wouldn't be surprised if in the near future there'll be an AI tool that just learns about you and your life and all of your insurance needs and then takes care of it from that point on and just comes to you. In fact, I think Compare the Market have their own auto survey product. I haven't really looked into what it is, but in my head it's that sort of thing where you maybe give it your information and it automatically goes and finds your products. But yeah, I think they're probably worried because they think AI is going to come and eat their lunch. And then I suppose you've got the big banks and institutions that don't want to be misquoted and misrepresented, and so probably are fearful of AI spouting stuff about them that isn't necessarily correct, or at least is out of date. So yeah, and I don't really know the answer to any of those things. I think there's probably, I know people don't want to crack down on what tools are able to say and what they aren't able to say, but I think with something as important as finance, and health as well. Having regulators heavily involved and setting the tone early is probably a good thing, because it would, it would allow people to just work on a level playing field. But yeah, that's kind of how I view it. I think a few companies are probably worried about things.
If you just think about the concept of a personal AI assistant, which a lot of firms are sort of chasing at the moment, a tool that knows you inside out, has access to your bank statements, knows what ailments you have, knows what your family setup is, your house, your mortgage, knows what your preferences are, like how much you care about the environment and all that kind of stuff. That agent would then be able to recommend it would be able to go out onto the internet and find the perfect provider for you in any area, really. So if you're looking for a new car, I've been doing it recently, actually, just, browsing for cars online and saying what would be a good car for me. And it comes up with 3 options, and they're all just like perfectly aligned to my values and my budget. And then you could say, well, what's the best loan to help me fund this car? And then you go out and find the best provider that's perfectly aligned to me. And as a result, that kind of research step, that human research step where I'm going into Google and looking at paid ads and all that and going to compare the market, arguably, if you extrapolate out what's happening, those tools kind of won't be needed anymore, because the AI system will just know what the best platform is. If you look at that scenario from the context of a business, you kind of got, your marketing budget is almost a bit pointless now, because that whole connecting your business with your customers is just done by the customer's AI agent. So your marketing needs to be almost like focused on all of these little micro niches. So is there going to be a growth in targeting specific micro niches? Are we going to see businesses blossom that focus on kind of families in Guernsey with 2 kids in a car who live in like Pacific part of the island, and then a business that just focuses right on that tiny little niche, and all of their content and products are perfectly aligned to that niche, so that the AI assistants always recommend that firm for those particular people? I don't know. It's an interest. I sort of thought about this quite a lot a couple of years ago when these tools first started coming online, thinking forward about what a world like that might look like. And I think there'll definitely be a rise in businesses that already, as a business, it's a wise move to find a niche and target that niche. As an agency, we target financial services because we're good at that and we've got experience in that, and it makes us a better fit for those businesses compared to an agency that serves all different types of business. But actually, moving forwards, is there going to be value in us targeting like 2 or 3 very specific micro niches within financial services? Because businesses in those niches, using their AIs, would specifically find their way to us rather than us finding them. I don't know.
That model sounds sort of idyllic, in sort
Yeah.
of like as a theory, but then then it kind of reminds me of the olden days of SEO, where you'd have in the footer of a website, you'd have web design company Cheshire, web design company Manchester,
Yeah.
like they cover every single place in the country, and and the ones that would show up wouldn't necessarily be the best companies; they'd just be the best at showing up. And so you wonder if the AI models would be too easily gamed in that approach. I mean, I don't know, because we've also spoken about the concept of a web for humans and a web for bots and agents. I can see that happening. And the companies that surface up-to-date, easily usable information on, say, mortgage rates and loan rates and blah, 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 will win simply because they are playing the right game and they're kind of providing the right information. But I do think brand will remain an important part of a company's kind of appeal as well, because you have to sell to the heart as well as the head.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately it would be a human decision on like what which agency to kind of pull the trigger on. It has to be. Otherwise that could be quite catastrophic. I'm conscious of time, but you did kind of give me an idea, Pat, of there's probably going to be a personal assistant and a business assistant with two kind of very different objectives, looking for like a website or looking to save money to go on holiday. And it'd be interesting to see kind of where those assistants live, because it feels like a very manual process to input all this information at the moment. You probably could, and the more technical people, I'm sure, like streamline that, but it'd have to keep up being updated. Who's gonna win the race to this, to this personal assistant and this business assistant, like platform? Will it be someone like Google, for example? At a basic level, you've kind of got something like, Google Home, which pulls all your devices together in your house and you can control them all from that app. Who's going to release that? Who's going to release that app which pulls together your whole life and like easily into this one space, both on a personal and business level? It's going to be quite interesting, and it's going to be a bit of a race, I think, over the next few years, which platform's going to be able to do that the best.
I really like the idea or the concept of a sort of, I was going to say digital passport, but that will probably trigger people who are worried about ID cards and stuff. But the concept of a sort of a bucket of information about you. So this is me, this is the products I use, this is stuff, just relevant information in a secure way that you can kind of pick up and place in whichever platform you need to use. And then if you don't want to use a platform any longer, you take it out of that and you put it in something else. That idea that would be life-changing for a lot of people, I think, because then you wouldn't need to keep inputting data into another tool about, no, I need, this is my car registration number at the moment, this is the date the renewal is, that just boring stuff that you could probably automate all of that just by having a single packet of information that you can just give to a tool that you need to use.
Where does the package live?
Yeah,
I guess that's the challenge, isn't it?
I think it needs to be independent, doesn't it? It needs to be something like you own and you control where it gets given to.
Someone's always trying to make some money somewhere. That's the problem.
Yeah, and right now there's this proliferation of open Claude-based tools, which are wrappers around Claude Code primarily, which run on your machine and have a memory on your machine and build up a picture of everything, and all the files are stored on your machine, and then they can work on that data and use large language model APIs to be useful and do things for you. That's exactly the kind of the ideal setup for a personal AI assistant, but it's quite technical to set up, and so it's not really accessible to the wider market. And I think if someone manages to take that concept and package it up in something where you can just quickly sign up online, then they'll be onto a winner. Meta in the last 24 hours have released a new model that's focused on providing personal AI services. But honestly, I wouldn't touch them with a barge pole. They're just one of the worst in terms of abusing personal data. But they're going for that market because they can see how lucrative it is. They're going for it hard. And
funnily enough, my holiday reading book was Careless People, the book about.
It's a good read. It's a good read.
It's kind of
terrifying at the same time.
Yeah, it's stuff I all suspected, but what a shocking company on the face of things.
Sounds
Absolutely
interesting.
Shocking. Yeah, shocking, and all. The whole culture of that company is just like Mark Zuckerberg from the top down, and it hasn't got the humanity's best interests at heart. And I won't say any more than that. Just read the book.
There we go, Paul. Maybe we need a Fin the Week book club now as well as a podcast, right?
Oh yeah, that'd be good.
I would recommend reading that for sure if anyone's listening.
So a bit of homework for everyone there. Shall we move on to Jargon Busters?
Let's do it.
So this is our feature where I've got a list of industry terms and see if you guys know what it means. I'd say we'd have some mixed successes over the week so far. Today's term is ETF.
Exchange Traded Funds, I think is what it stands for. As for what it actually is, I'm not 100% sure.
I think it's like a collection. It's like a sort of group of like investments that are like packaged together that like a fund administration firm or an investment firm will offer. so that you can, so as an end user or a company, you can invest into that. So yeah, so you kind of like, it's like a way, yeah.
I feel like Russ knows this because I recall you explaining it to me once, and I've probably forgotten it.
God. Yeah. I mean, I'm glad I went last, but I couldn't remember exactly what the acronym is. I think you were right, Paul. But yeah, so a group of funds. So it could be a sustainable ETF, for example, or a specific, kind of group, technology or something like that, where you just have all like funds kind of grouped together within one ETF instead of wanting to invest in them separately. I think that's right.
Yeah,
I
bang
feel
on.
like we should know this. If we don't, it's embarrassing. So it sounds, hopefully we've got it right.
Absolutely wrong. No. So yes, exchange traded fund, a basket of securities that trades on an exchange like a stock.
Yeah, phew.
Yeah, largely correct.
Well done, everyone. So we'll have more of that next week. Be an interesting chat again, I'm sure. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Before we go, it's time for a quick shameless plug. This episode was brought to you by Indulge, a digital agency built on thinking for the global financial services sector. If you're looking for an agency that can specialize in UX and design, production, and marketing, then look no further. To find out more, visit indulge.digital. Thanks for listening.